Okay, hello and welcome. This is week 3 already. We're mid-September of season 2 of the TBD college football podcast. We will eventually get a name. I, Newbeck, and joined as always by my good friend and model Maryland citizen, Dugan. Dugan, how are we doing on this fine, very fair weather Tuesday?
Doing all right. Had a long weekend. Got my first red zone experience this weekend.
I don't understand.
I've never watched red zone before.
I don't understand still.
I don't like. I'm not. I'm not sure. I'm not sure it's for me. I can understand why people love it though.
Oh my god, it's so great.
It makes my two biggest knocks on it. Well, actually, really, the one is that I feel as soon as the 4 o'clock game hits, I feel like the day's been like 38 hours long already. It really makes my Sundays go by so slow.
Oh my! I'm the exact opposite. I think it goes by so fast.
Now, this also might be me being a first timer. I mean, obviously, the more I watch it, the more I'll be okay. This kind of makes sense or something like that. But it makes it go a lot quicker. But I was gassed by the 4:30 games. I was like, I need to just. My brain is mush.
Yeah, I didn't get to watch the 1 o'clock games because of my kickball tournament. But winning championships are pretty sweet too. So
yeah, I was a noodle coming back from the Borgata. So I laid on the couch and ate a bunch of hoagies and watched Red Zone.
That makes me happy.
I haven't done that in a while. It was sweet.
Yeah, obviously we'll get into last week's games, week 2 games, and our picks. Another poor week, but I turned to Laura on Saturday. I was like, "Hey, I had a bad week. I haven't been really drunk in a while. Let's go out and get hosed." And we did exactly that. And once USC went into the fourth quarter is when I started getting a little hazy. But I did make sure to just be a complete zombie at the bar while watching all 4 of the really good games that took place this week. Really got spoiled with some upsets. Unfortunately, there was nothing to write home about the 12 o'clock games or even the 3:30 games, really. We thought that Pittsburgh was going to give Penn State a hell of a fight. That did not happen, as Pittsburgh's offense was not existent, to say the least. And Trace McSorley just had a huge game passing, and Penn State looks really good. But again, not much of a game there. Looking around, Michigan kind of stuttered out of the gates with Cincinnati, but ended up just clobbering them. And Louisville looked pretty human against the North Carolina squad that is winless this season. But again, they edged them out by a good 12, 14 points there. So if you don't mind, Dugan, or if you don't have a whole lot of notes on any other games, we'll just get right into our evening games. And
I want to say one thing.
Yeah.
This is the second week in a row that the scheduling has been so bad in terms of, it was the Sunday of last Sunday when they had just two 7 o'clock games and nothing else on the whole day. And then we have 3 games at 7 o'clock this Saturday.
Oh, 4 games.
So hard to watch. So hard.
4 games. I had a tough time as well. Thankfully, I was very.
You go back and forth, and you just feel like an idiot. And you have to play that Notre Dame game at 3. Then you play the Auburn Clemson game. Maybe that's your noon game, noon 3:30, and then you have your Oklahoma Ohio State game night game, and then you go out to the West Coast for USC Stanford.
Yeah.
It's not that difficult. It's just sort of frustrating. It's really, really frustrating.
No, I agree. And I guess we'll start from last game here, and at least the least exciting, least surprising game with USC Stanford. Sam Darnold bounced back in week 2 after a very sluggish start against Western Michigan, and just looked like the future Jets' number 1 overall pick. It was ridiculous. He had over 300 yards, 4 TDs, and Stanford really wasn't in the game at all during the whole game. I don't think so.
No.
So there's not a whole lot of surprise there. USC and Washington is coming up, and that'll be a hell of a game to watch. But Stanford, unfortunately, is just a good, not great team again.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, they're kind of there, and I feel like they're almost like in this kind of NBA team lull where, like, they're good enough to make the playoffs, but they're not good enough. Like, you know what I mean? They're just kind of like in this weird in-between where, like, they're good enough to kind of stay relevant and get some of the top recruits given the school stature, but they just never kind of piece it all together outside of what that luck year and then the year with Richard Sherman, like that year when they upset USC, I believe. But no, yeah, that's just kind of a weird team.
Yeah, there's just really not a whole lot to say for when it comes to
no, there isn't.
The what is it? The Crimson?
They are the Cardinal.
The Cardinal, excuse me.
Sorry.
So yeah, our least interesting game of the 4 big ones that we had. We'll move on here to a pretty defensive slugging match in Clemson-Auburn. Really cool game, at least the start of it, with Clemson coming down the hill. It's sort of the twilight hour. Both teams are orange and dipshit purple or whatever, and so it's a really cool home and home they've played over the last 2 years. Sort of a litmus test to see where these teams are, and each time Clemson has turned out a good enough performance to edge them out. I'm not going to say that Clemson was dominant, which, if you read around, you sort of get that sentiment that Auburners just leaps and bounds, not even close to being a team this year. Obviously their offense was stalled a lot and had a lot of chances that they did not capitalize to get in the end zone. And Clemson's big boy defense came up again and held them out of the end zone. So both teams good, not great. Clemson's new offense behind Bryant had some hiccups, but again, they were able to score twice at home, and they look like they're on their way to possibly another ACC championship.
Yeah, their front seven is no joke. That's an NFL front seven that is going to be causing a lot of trouble. Auburn's offensive line was terrible, but I don't know how much you can say terrible when you're going against the NFL caliber front seven. I do think that Auburn's going to be playing a factor in the SEC. I kind of take this as the Alabama-Florida State kind of game where I don't think the loser necessarily is out of any playoff ramifications. Obviously, when you have the Iron Bowl to look forward to for the Auburn Tigers. So I don't mind both games. I mean, both defenses were very good. It's going to be interesting to see how the season plays out, but keeping an eye on both these defenses.
Yep. It's almost reminiscent of these Alabama LSU games where it's just defensive stops and plays after defensive plays, and you're sitting there, and I can hear some of the critics say, oh, what a boring game. I thought it was a very exciting game, and if you sort of have an interest in each team, you were pretty entertained. But I don't think this is a nail in the coffin for Auburn as much as people are writing them off already. Listening to the Pod 5 Line show obviously is not a great perspective, but before going to the gym yesterday, I just kind of turned it on for shits and gigs, and man, they are ready for another title there, and some just wanted to change the guard. I don't know what else they can do. So who knows? Clemson, another big match coming up that we'll cover in Louisville this week. So we'll get another litmus test of that defense and see how it is against that high-powered Lamar Jackson-led offense. We'll go to the third game of the evening, and I think the most interesting in terms of headlines and implications. Obviously, I stood here last week and told everybody, or at least all 20 of our listeners, that this is Ohio State's game to lose, and that I would be very surprised if that were the case. Ohio State at home. Ohio State last year embarrassed Oklahoma, in Norman, and Lincoln Riley's second game after Stoops, stepped it down. It was impossible for Ohio State to lose. And what did they do? They came out. Baker Mayfield had an enormous game. And J.T. Barrett did not. He looked very limited in that Ohio State offense. The only thing that they really could get going was Dobbins, who didn't even break 100 yards, it seemed. And Ohio State, drops a big one at home.
Yeah, that was one of the games I caught a little bit of. I was more so watching the other two, but it just looked like any time Ohio State would get a minimum amount of momentum or first downs, punt, turnover, something. JT Barrett, I don't know if he's hurt. I don't know if he's still getting in his reps with the new supporting cast turnover. I don't know. The good news is they have some time to figure it out. Once again, they are one of the benefactors of having this early home and home away with a very good team. So maybe this wakes up, and maybe this allows Urban Meyer to kind of go back to the drawing board of how to attack some of these different teams offensively and defensively.
Do you think the rest of their schedule, and for Ohio State at least, obviously not having to play Penn State for a couple weeks, but with the amount of love that the Big Ten is getting, do you think Ohio State does have the time to fix things, get things, right the ship?
Kind of. If I look at their schedule right now, it looks like they have some time. Army, UNLV, Rutgers, Maryland, Nebraska. I mean, they have the 10/28 date against Penn State. Luckily, it's home. But outside of that, it's kind of Penn State, and maybe you have to worry about Michigan on the day before Thanksgiving, or somewhere around Thanksgiving date. I think they do. I mean, I just have to say that just from historically Urban Meyer losing an early game. Maybe it's the Virginia Tech game, but I don't count them out.
Like I said, so much surrounding Ohio State. People, again, took to Twitter, and columnists are not happy with that performance, and starting to panic a little bit. It sounds like at Ohio State. Obviously, with that schedule coming up, that panic will obviously go away until Penn State, which looks like a very big contender, comes up on the schedule on Halloween weekend. Is this Oklahoma's year to screw up in the Big 12. I feel like that's always the case. But is this Oklahoma's year?
I can see that. All I know is if things go according to plan, this is going to be the biggest bedlam with Oklahoma State that I can remember. Both probably going to be undefeated. It's going to be. I'm so excited for that bedlam.
It's yeah. I mean, obviously they play everybody in the Big 12, and then play a Big 12 championship this year, first year of that happening, and it's just Oklahoma's. Obviously I think they have a free pass if they lose one of these games. They obviously can't lose two, but the road to the college football playoff is now a pretty big possibility. Obviously, Oklahoma State, standing in the way from here on out. So a lot of cool things. I loved Baker Mayfield taking that flag and trying to
apologize though. That pissed me off.
Yeah, apologizing. Don't do that. Don't be like LeBron.
And what makes me even more mad about it is I feel like that he's a guy that probably is not going to have an NFL career. So who gives a shit what that would do to your draft stock or your perception outside of Norman? Who cares?
Dude, you're doing college football a favor. You're creating a rivalry. You're creating buzz. You're creating this hatred between programs, big programs, huge programs. And to apologize, even though you didn't even – it's turf. It's not like you could plant a flag in there if you wanted to. So – I just, it's just kind of one of those things that somebody made him do. I feel like. I think he walked off that stage, went behind the curtain, cracked open a couple cold ones, and said, "Fuck that."
Yeah.
Excuse my language for all the listeners at home. We'll get to our last game here and check in on the weather report in South Bend.
Yeah.
Georgia.
Not as bad as people think.
Not as bad as people think. Well, that is good. Georgia took a trip to Notre Dame this weekend. We'll get to the game here in a second, but one of the bigger stories from this was the fact that Georgia traveled so well.
Yeah, they traveled extremely well. That's awesome. No, I mean, I don't mind teams travel well. That you just got to tip your cap. I mean, but when you look at some of the stuff, the first thing that comes to mind is some of the worst offensive play calling by Notre Dame. They must have ran like 19 just failed screens and checkdowns. It was horrible to watch. Nothing down the field, which is kind of the strength of this team when you have wide receivers that can get vertical and go quickly, not playing in their strengths. Another thing, I think Notre Dame defense played extremely well. I think that game's a lot different if that Georgia player doesn't make one of the touchdown catches of the season, falling down one-handed against his shoulder.
No, I agree.
Yeah, tip your cap to that.
I agree. I saw that and I was like, "There's no way that's a catch."
Unbelievable catch. No, and everyone's saying like, "Oh, I think like this is like Brian Kelly's days are numbered." I mean, take away the equation of that they had a backup quarterback in, and you understand that they put up 20 points against a SEC defense. They held a pretty good running back tandem to 20 points, they scored 19, then up 20. All things considered, I think they played very well against an above-average SEC team. It's not like the Jake Fromm kid was like me out there or is throwing wrong-handed. Still a really good team. I think they played very well. I think this is a step in the right direction. Their defense looks absolutely fast, and I think things are fun. This is a game that you don't mind losing because obviously you want to win it, but I mean I think it shows that things are in the right direction.
No, and obviously we're singing a completely different tune today. If Notre Dame edges them out, a hard fought game, and obviously Kelly was extremely pissed afterwards, which obviously isn't a good look for Kelly. In the last year, media-wise, handling all these losses has not looked good doing it, and which I don't think Notre Dame really cares, but it just gives fuel for people to start talking negatively about the program and about his coaching style, and they just start, they start maybe taking liberties, writing articles or writing things about him that they probably shouldn't.
Yeah, we're not talking about Georgia coming and taking them behind the woodshed and winning by 5 touchdowns like was the national championship game. I mean, they still played pretty decent offense and pretty decent defense against, like I said, an above average team with a strong away presence there. I think this is certainly a building block. And you also have to have the kind of context if you're coming into the season unranked, freshman or a rookie quarterback in the sense that he hasn't even started or completed a game. And you're not going to win every game. This is definitely a step in the right direction. And I think, like we said, what was earlier today, or earlier in the season, that they're starting to get athletes. They're starting to get players who are going to be taught football, not the players who aren't the freakish athletes. They're starting to get those players and starting to pay dividends with a lot quicker and rallying on defense.
Looking at Notre Dame's schedule, it's not, I remember years where Notre Dame played really tough, slate of games here, but it doesn't seem to be necessarily the case in this season. Given sort of the dynamic of their schedule, what's the expectations for wins and losses here for Kelly now moving forward? Are we talking 4?
Having to play that, excuse me, the ACC slate kind of backs out some games that you could probably front fill, like they did with Oklahoma in 2013 and a couple other of the teams, i.e. Michigan, Michigan State. So what's going to, I can probably see them losing at the USC games will be a tough one. I think they maybe handle Miami, and I probably see them having maybe 3 losses total.
That'd be nice. That'd be nice getting in a very good bowl game.
That's kind of not many 4-8 teams bounce back to a 9-3 season. That's still going in the right direction with a quarterback who's going to return, with wide receivers and skill position players who are going to return. It's not too bad.
All right, so cloudy with a chance of rain.
Yeah, I think they're doing the right thing. That the defense has certainly gotten a lot better from last year. They would have to win 49-46 games. Now they can actually play defense and be able to let the offense have a couple off series, which is nice. But we'll see where we go there. It's long season.
You're right about that. So, given the sort of time constraints here, but we've always wanted to try something out here, maybe the season, and maybe have just kind of a rant section of, somebody has prepared notes, and just sort of give their thoughts and observations. Obviously, this time around, or at least first time around, more of a conversation, bounce some ideas off you, and feel free to, just jump in off the top ropes and tell me that I'm flat out wrong. But Dugan and I have always had a conversation in the background, sort of as a joke over the last couple of years, of the SEC being done. And for, when we first really started talking about college football seriously, 3 or 4 years ago, I told you, Dugan, that you were high, you were drinking Haterade, and that you didn't know what you were talking about. Obviously, probably just to stir the pot and get the conversation going. Now that we're seeing a lot of these coaches fall out here, it's a truth that I think is going to be hard to swallow, but also that's starting to look more true every day, if that makes any sense. If we take a look back over the last, 13 years, obviously the SEC dominated in the late 2000s and early, teens, where, you had your Floridas under Urban Meyer, Nick Saban's, your LSU's under Les Miles, your Auburn with Cam Newton, obviously that one year. And then if they're not winning the national championship, they are in the national championship game. They are in these big bowl games. They are pounding other conferences. And in the last 3 or 4 years, you're seeing that the coaching that used to be there really isn't there anymore. Obviously, Urban Meyer got sick and left for the Big Ten, where obviously they've been stacking up coaches left and right and have a number of good programs coming out of there. You've got Les Miles losing his job at LSU because he wasn't beating Bama every once in a while at least, and towards the end there, they were losing games that they probably shouldn't have. Obviously, the Wisconsin game, losing to Auburn, which then brings me to Auburn. Obviously going through 3 different coaches over the last 10 years. Obviously, beating Bama in the kick six and the national championship with Cam, but lately, just like this week, falling to other big tier programs like Clemson, and sort of a lackluster performances in bowl games come the end of the season. Obviously, the prize horse in the stable Bama has been the staple of the SEC for probably the last 6 years, but I look at this roster and especially this offense, looking one-dimensional through their first 2 games. Can they withstand this? Obviously, whoever has asked that over the last 10 years, is Bama done, or Bama is done, is just an idiot. Obviously, they haven't shown any signs of slowing down, in their big games, but it could be. I think the beginning of the end for the SEC bragging rights, at least when it comes to, hey, we're the powerhouse conference, we're the conference to beat. Getting the last couple of years without a conference play, and even in conference play, being below par. Another note I didn't bring up was Arkansas. Arkansas under Petrino, who is now at Louisville, would give Alabama fits, LSU fits, was a program on the rise. Obviously, Petrino fucking his secretary didn't help, but another program that just got handled by TCU at home, just kind of goes to the depth of what's really going on in the SEC. Sort of a disorganized rant there, but the first one of many segments here to come.
No, I agree. I think whenever I've always said that joke, it's been a little lighthearted, but I do think that it's the conference is pretty top heavy in terms of you have a great 1, 2, 3, but outside of that, it's just kind of average. So I've always kind of thought, but we don't have to go any more on that. I agree with you now. I think it's they might be in some trouble.
Dying, not dead.
Yes.
And maybe my last point here is that in college, 2010, 2011, that Florida-Alabama SEC championship was just an awesome game to watch. Meyer versus Saban. You got Tebow. It was just blockbuster after blockbuster SEC championship. In the last 2, you've seen Florida get absolutely manhandled by Alabama. It is not a game after the first quarter. So
hey, let the record show. Wasn't Florida beating Alabama 2-0?
You're right.
That was sweet. For a second there, I tricked my tiny brain into thinking it could happen.
Hey,
So picks.
Yeah, let's go. I unfortunately, due to Hurricane Irma, Miami, Florida State is postponed this week. Deciding not to play. Obviously, the damage is is too big down there in Florida as they're starting to clean up now from all the debris and stuff like that. So a pretty big blockbuster game that we're going to miss out on. Florida State and Miami have only played one game and will have only played one game through the first 3 weeks, which is kind of crazy to believe. But, you know, Cat 4 Hurricanes, I guess we'll do that for you. We'll go to our first game here. Tennessee, Florida, a 3:30 kickoff in Gainesville. Obviously, the decision coming down today that they are going to play this game. And another interesting matchup, obviously, just after my rant of 23 Tennessee against 24 ranked Florida. Florida's being favored by 4.5 points. Butch Jones out of Tennessee, you know, considered on the hot seat, I guess. You know, obviously a program 4 or 5 years in the making and need sort of a marquee win here to, you know, be a real contender out of the East. I'm going to try something different here, seeing how my picks have been so incredibly poor last year and this year that my gut says that Tennessee would, you know, obviously win the game. So I will eat the points and say that Florida is going to blow them out.
I'm in the same rationale. I think for the bit, like picking Tennessee.
Let the record show that I think Tennessee is going to win the game, but
I will make a little note on this.
I will make a little note.
I'll make a little insert comment. Brad thinks 10 is going to win. Okay.
We'll go to another SEC matchup, an interesting one out of the West. LSU taking a ride to Stark Vegas, baby. Mississippi State 2-0 starting the season. LSU number 12 in the country, 2-0. LSU being favored by just 7 points. Dugan, this screams, what the hell is going on in Vegas? I figured LSU, but it would be favored. This. Exactly. I think LSU would have been favored by 21, given Mississippi State's season last year and the way their team has played recently.
What time is this game? If it's the noon game, I would pick Mississippi State, but it's a night game. I'm picking LSU.
Oh, man. So you're eating the points.
Yeah, I'm going to eat the points. I'm going LSU.
Going LSU. Huh. You know, my first instinct was to do the exact same thing. I think this is just silly and irresponsible that they would only be favored by 7 points against Mississippi State. Therefore, I will take the points and Mississippi State to make this ball game, and maybe Mississippi State is back. Fear the bell. Who knows? We'll get to a very interesting matchup here in UCLA and Memphis. Memphis has sort of been a dark horse team over the recent years in that they've been able to put together some pretty interesting ball games against pretty good programs. In this game, a 12 o'clock start in Memphis, Tennessee, UCLA is only being favored by 3 points. Again, another line that kind of screams what the hell is going on in Vegas. As I think UCLA should be favored by 10 more points. Am I wrong?
No, you're right. I definitely the time difference is going to screw them up, in my opinion.
That is true. It's Memphis, Tennessee.
It's a 9 a.m. kick, I think.
Yeah, it's either 9 or 10. I guess that's what Vegas is taking into consideration here. It might be hot. I don't know.
Memphis doesn't stink, though.
No, Memphis does not stink. Both teams obviously undefeated, 2 weeks of the season. Josh Rosen obviously playing for UCLA. But, there's a Henderson kid out of the backfield from Memphis. Again, two teams I really don't know a whole lot about. And obviously, it's with, my beginning rant being that UCLA should be favored by way more points. I'm going to take Memphis and the points and lock it in.
I completely agree. That -3 really raised my nose on that. I'm going to trust the guts. Taking Memphis.
Taking Memphis. All right. I like it. Which now gets us to our fourth and most intriguing game of the week, as we previously mentioned in the podcast earlier. We are going to Louisville, Kentucky for an 8 o'clock tip with the Tigers from Clemson. Clemson is favored by 3 points in this one as well. I think when it jumps, when you originally look at it, you're like, wow, Clemson, obviously a lot stronger team. Louisville's defense sucks. Obviously I think Clemson's going to win by a lot more than that, but got to remember that Louisville at home against FSU last year was an absolute spanking against a very good Florida State team.
Yeah, completely agree. I think game day is probably going to be there. It's going to get them up a little bit more excited. There is a little bit of a revenge factor with how the game ended last year. Lamar Jackson's back. That defense is going to be good. I think just slow down and close. I think a close game, and I gotta be able to. I'm going to take Louisville. I think I have to take the points in this close game.
I'm going the other way. I'm sorry. I did on the spot. Stop thinking about it, Neubeck. Sort of game plan here. I think Clemson has a staple win here by a good 10, 13 points and sort of closes the book on the ACC, at least until the Florida State game comes up here, and I'm gonna eat the points and take Clemson.
All right, so
Dugan, who is your dark horse of the week?
So, because I stupidly picked a game that didn't happen or got postponed last week, my two, I'll go one, Brad, and let you pick one, then I'll do the second one to make sure I don't take one of yours.
All right.
Little bounce back week. Love Ohio State -30 against Army. Love it.
Oh, all right. I like it. I'm going. What's your rule, Dugan? 20 or 30?
I normally try and do 20. I mean, I guess there's really no rule, but I just kind of something what's what I'm looking for? Just something that just sticks out that we wouldn't normally put on our docket.
All right. Well, at least 20 points here. 20 points or 21 and a half point favorite, Virginia Tech visiting the Pirates of East Carolina.
Brad, I knew if you would have given me, I wish I could have bet you before you just opened your mouth.
Why?
I knew you were going to pick this game as soon as I saw it.
Who do you
This is your favorite matchup because you always pick ECU.
I do always pick ECU, but not this year.
You always pick ECU, and it's
not this year.
This is how you made all that money that one time.
It is. Cannon out of ECU, just putting it on Virginia Tech. Love it. But no.
Tech?
Yeah, I'm taking Virginia Tech. East Carolina's in the dump, man, and I think they just go in and spank them. It's a 3:30 kickoff game, and I don't think there's a student in the student section by 4:15.
Yeah, that I can definitely see that. So what I got cooking, my second one is Wisconsin and BYU. I'm taking BYU minus 15.5.
Wow. I'd probably go the other way, Bob, but hey, gotta let you fly.
I think Wisconsin's kind of had that slow start a couple times in a row. They're playing out in Provo. It's going to be a little weird trip. I think that game's a lot closer than we think.
Interesting enough.
There we go.
Yeah, hard to believe that week 3 is almost here, man. This season's sort of flying by as is. Hopefully,
No, it's definitely crazy. Like, we're getting there.
Hopefully, some of these Florida teams can pick it up and start playing some meaningful games here. Obviously, it'll be week 4 before some of these teams are able to play their second game. But can't control the weather.
Sure can't.
Duke, and how's kickball going?
We start tomorrow.
Oh, exciting! What position do you play? Do you pitch?
I pitch on this one, and then I play one that's with my high school friends. Starts next Thursday. It's actually cup in hand, which is my favorite to play.
Ooh, wow! They let you do that?
Have you ever played cup in hand?
No.
Oh, Bradley, it's easily my favorite thing to do. I've kind of been kickballed out. Like this though, you get a full beer in your hand, you have to play defense and play offense with a cup in your hand. It's awesome. It makes it so much harder, and you would love it.
Kind of like pickleball, huh?
Yeah, you didn't take too well to that, did you?
I didn't get to play.
Did you play pickleball? I remember.
I didn't get to play. It was after my time. I remember you texting me though, my first week of real actual work, and you were like, dude, pickleball.
Dude, it's the best.
I see it all the time in the rec center here. So
I highly suggest you play cup in hand if you have one.
We have cops that show up every week for our kickball league.
That's not good.
No,
it's definitely legal. I mean, it's completely legal.
Obviously we could put it in cups and they don't care, but we had first week last fall, we had 18 teams in the league, and obviously a shit ton of cars at local park. Park closed at 9. Last game didn't get done until 9:30, so they locked one of the cars in there, and one of the guys was so drunk he rammed the gate.
Probably not a good look.
But yeah, blackout drunk. So every week we get stern emails. Classic, yeah. All right, Dugan. That's week 3 in the books. I look forward to conversing with you next week. Same time as always.
Absolutely. Let me know actually about this power rankings.
Oh, I love them.
All right, Bradley. Take care.
You too.